Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm Dr. Abdul Rehman, your course instructor for a subject Human Physiology, having a course code MLT-111. Today I'm going to record part A of our second lecture, that is cardiovascular system. Lecture outlines. First, we will discuss the cardiovascular system, which is a closed system, and it contains different components like heart, blood vessels, capillaries, arteries, veins, and then we will discuss the basic function of different parts of the cardiovascular system. And the basic function of the cardiovascular system is transportation, and transportation of what? Blood and nutrients, and remove metabolic waste from the body. And then at the end we will discuss the general function of the cardiovascular system, that is to maintain homeostasis within a body, which is a protective mechanism. After this, we will discuss the physiological anatomy of the heart, which is the principal organ of the cardiovascular system. It contains different chambers and walls. So we will discuss the different chambers and walls in detail with their basic function. And after this, we will discuss the function and structure of right and left ventricle. Let's start our lecture. Cardiovascular system. It is a closed system, also termed as circulatory system or vascular system, and different organs are in connection with each other in cardiovascular systems to distribute blood to all parts of the body. And blood is the two types. One is the oxygenated blood and the other one is deoxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood contains oxygen and nutrients. So with the help of cardiovascular system, the oxygenated blood has been pumped from the heart to all parts of the body, while deoxygenated blood that contains carbon dioxide and metabolic waste. So in return from the tissues, deoxygenated blood has been bring back to the heart through the cardiovascular system. Here you can see this is the cardiovascular system. The main principal organ is heart. It has two-sided. One is the right side and another one is the left side. Both sides contains arteria and ventricle. The right side of the heart collect deoxygenated blood from the tissues and send it to the lungs through pulmonary arteries, where the gases has been exchanged with the environment, and from the lung the oxygenated blood has been sent to the left side of the heart through pulmonary vein, and from the left side of the heart the oxygenated blood has been pumped to the all parts of the body. This whole coordination has been called as cardiovascular system. Components of cardiovascular system. The principal component of cardiovascular system is heart. It has four chambers, two at the upper portion called arteria and two at the bottom portion called ventricle. Heart provides force of distributions and also termed as driving force for the cardiovascular system. What does it mean? It means that by pumping of heart, the blood has been distributed to all parts of the body. The second part of the cardiovascular system is blood vessels. There are different type of blood vessels like arteries and arterioles. They collect oxygenated blood from the heart and distribute it to the all parts of the body. The next vessels are venules and veins that collect deoxygenated blood from the tissue and brings it back to the right side of the heart. While blood capillaries play a role of cord association that connect arteries with veins and act as a site of exchange of gases, nutrients, and metabolic waste. Here you can see the general structure of the heart. This is the right side of the heart, and this is the left side of the heart. Between these two sides, there is a septum which separates right side from the left side. The upper portion are called arteria, while the lower portion is called ventricles. There is a superior vena cava, aorta. Aorta has been connected with the left side of the heart. So deoxygenated blood from the body came through superior vena cava to the right side of the heart, and from the right side of the heart the blood has been pumped to the lungs through pulmonary artery where gases exchange has been take place, and after this through pulmonary vein the oxygenated blood has been bring back to the left side of the heart, and from the left side of the heart the blood has been pumped to the circulatory system called as systemic system. So what is the basic function of the various parts of the cardiovascular system? Basic function of the heart is uh, to pump the blood. So the heart, as we have studied out, it has two-sided. The left side of the heart is being called as a high pressure side because it pumps oxygenated blood to the systemic arteries at sufficient pressure that drives blood to the tissue, while the right side of the heart, which has low pressure side, collect deoxygenated blood from the body and then pump it to the lungs through pulmonary arteries with the lower pressures. While blood vessels, arteries, as the name indicates, they collect oxygenated blood. So the aorta and the pulmonary artery are elastic arteries. They have sufficient elasticity. So whenever there is increase in the heart rate, so they will tolerate it and then facilitate the sufficient distribution of the blood to the different parts of the body. While arterioles, these are also called as resistance vessels because they are smaller in size and have low diameters, which undergo changes in order to regulate the blood flow into the capillaries. While veins, these are larger in size and also called as precursor veins or volume reservoir because they contains large amount of the blood. General function of cardiovascular system. The general function of cardiovascular system is to maintain homeostasis, which is a constant internal environment. What does it mean? It means that homeostasis is the state of steady internal physical and chemical conditions maintained by living organisms. In this conditions, the organism can perform their optimal activities and maintain their different variables up to preset limits like body temperature and body fluid. So during metabolic activities within tissues, there might be chances that the internal hemostasis conditions will be disturbed, but cardiovascular system will maintain it by continuous supply of the blood to the tissue. The next is physiological condition of the heart. Heart is the pumping system, which is the principal organ of the cardiovascular system. It lies in the chest cavity, partially behind the sternum and in between the right and left lungs. It has been covered by a membrane called pericardial membrane, which has been filled with the fluid, so heart can tolerate external stimuli. In addition to this, the heart muscles are cardiac muscles or myocardium, which are hollow muscular organ system. Cardiac chambers, as we know that heart contains two arteria and two ventricles. In between the two arteria there is a septum called interarterial septum, while it also contains two ventricles, right ventricles and left ventricles, which are also separated from each other by interventricular septum. Septum is a membrane that separates the two parts of the heart. And the wall of the left ventricle is about 3 times thicker than the wall of the right ventricle. Why? What is the reason behind this? Because left ventricle are powerful side of the heart and it pump blood to the systemic circulation. That's why thickness of the left ventricle is more as compared to the right ventricle. And both arteria are completely separated from the ventricles by a fibrous ring called arterioventricular ring. Here you can see this is the right arteria and this is the left arteria. So there is a membrane called interarterial membrane which separates left artery from the right. Similarly, in the right ventricle has been separated from the left ventricle through interventricular septum, and arteria are completely separated from the ventricles by fibrous ring-like structure called arterioventricular ring. So what is the function of the cardiac chambers? The arteria have two main functions. They act as a blood reservoir for the blood returning back to the heart. Like if we consider about the right arteria, then it collects deoxygenated blood from the body through superior vena cava, while left arteria collect oxygenated blood from the lung, and they act as a primer pump. While the ventricles, on the other hand, are powerful cardiac pumps, filling the arteries with the blood. Right ventricles pump blood to the lungs through pulmonary arteries, while left ventricle pump blood to the aorta and to the systemic circulation. The right ventricle, which is called as pulmonary pump, push blood to the pulmonary arteries, while the left ventricle push blood into the aorta during ventricular systole. Cardiac walls. The human heart contains 4 walls, that is, 2 arterioventricular walls, also called as AV walls, between the arteria and the ventricle, and there are 2 different type of walls: tricuspid walls and mitral walls. Tricuspid walls lies between the right atrium and the right ventricle, while M arteria lies between the left atrium and the left ventricle, while two semilunar walls like aortic walls between the left ventricle, and here you can see in the structure these are the tricuspid walls between the right atrium and right ventricle, and here is the mitral walls between the left atrium and left ventricle, while semilunar walls like aortic walls, it lies between the left ventricle and aorta, while pulmonary walls that lies between the right ventricle and the pulmonary trunk. Function of the cardiac walls. The arterioventricular walls. What is the function of arterioventricular walls? The cardiac walls allows the blood to pass only in one direction. That is, it allows the blood to pass from the artery into the ventricle during ventricle diastole. While during ventricle systole, the AV wall close to prevent backflow of blood from the ventricle into the artery. Here you can see when right atrium collect deoxygenated blood from the body, then during systemic ventricle diastole, the tricuspid wall becomes open and it allows blood to pass to the right ventricle. But during ventricle systole contraction, these walls becomes closed, so prevent the backflow. If sometimes right ventricle during contractions pump blood back to the right atrium, there is a disease conditions which has been led towards the cardiac arrest or sometimes heart attack. The semilunar valves, it allows the blood to pass from the ventricle into the arteries during ventricle systole. While during ventricle diastole, these valves prevent backflow of the blood from the arteries into the ventricles. Here you can see there are two semilunar valves, aortic valves and pulmonary valves. So left ventricle when contracted, then these valves becomes open and the blood has been passed to the aorta. Similar in the right side, when the right ventricle become contracted, the pulmonary valves become open and the blood has been passed to the through pulmonary artery to the lungs. But during diastolic condition, these valves becomes closed to prevent the backflow of the blood. Function of the cardiac valves. It should be noted that the AV valves open when the arterial pressure becomes higher than the ventricle pressure. What does it mean? Ventricles becomes in diastolic state while artery become in the systolic state, and close when the ventricle pressure becomes higher than the arterial pressure. What does it mean? It means when ventricle becomes in the systolic conditions and artery in the diastolic condition, then these valve becomes closed. Similarly, the semilunar valves open when the ventricle pressure becomes higher than the arterial pressure. It means ventricle during systolic condition these valves become opens, but during ventricle diastolic conditions these valves become open to prevent the backflow of the blood. The right ventricles. The right ventricles, here you can see, this is the right ventricles. The right ventricles pumps relatively large volume of blood at low pressure through the pulmonary circulations. Because it collects deoxygenated blood and it is a low pressure site, that's why it pumps blood to the pulmonary artery. And the normal cross section of the right ventricle is crescent shape. It is a loop like structure, but sometimes there is a ventricle hypertrophy, right ventricle hypertrophy. In this case, if the right ventricle continuously pumps blood for a longer period of time, its crescent shape will become cylindrical and it will lead towards a disease called right ventricle hypertrophy. In this case, the size of the heart becomes enlarged. So the blood the function of the heart will be disturbed. This is one of the sign of the heart disease. Similarly, in the left side of the ventricles, you can see it is a cylindrical in shape and it is a powerful side of the blood, and it pump blood to the systemic circulations, and the left ventricle work much harder than the right ventricle. And the left ventricle is more commonly affected by disease process than the right ventricle because they have more stress and more prone towards the infections like myocardial infarction, etc. With this, our lecture has been finished. Thank you so much.